Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DriveThruRPG review, my written and video view series. We'll take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at DriveThruRPG.com. This video will be reviewing the Tier 1 adventure Rescue at Griffoncrag Pass, designed by Chad M. Lensch for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider using my affiliate links for your online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/RogueWatson. I really fell in love with this adventure from the beginning. It has one of the most attractive layouts and designs that I have seen in a long time. Just gorgeous, full color, full page artwork, and really, really well drawn, commissioned original character art for all the major NPCs. The layout is amazing. It's divided up and well organized to where it's extremely easy to read and easy to parse. It's got the level ups very clearly labeled, just gold pedestal for how this PDF is put together. Absolutely incredible. And I really loved the first half of this adventure. It's kind of like Ghosts of Saltmarshy, where it's a coastal town and there's a lot of opportunity for water-based adventures. There's a lighthouse. There's a neat little backstory with the BBEG. In this case, the big bad evil guy is a manticore, which is kind of interesting. And the beginning opening quests, and especially the colorful NPCs, and the part where they go on the little ship, and there's really fun like captain and first mate and all that. Just all of that worked so well and was such a great job, and I was so on board with making this this is one of the best adventures I've read all year. And then it just kind of loses me when we get to the emotionally telepathic spider civil war, which I very much appreciate. An adventure that's specifically a low-level adventure that does not resort to using goblins or kobolds, because that is like 90% of the low-level adventures out there. So that's a huge plus. On the other hand, we kind of lose sight of what I thought was going to be the cool, rescue mission and deal more with like shipwrecks and stuff. And instead it becomes just kind of a dungeon crawl in a cave filled with spiders. And then there's this very bizarre, like you can take sides in this spider civil war thing that's going on, and they can communicate with you. So, and I'm not like a huge arachnophobe or anything. I mean, I play fantasy RPGs, and spiders are just one of the most common enemies that you see in just every like hack and slash or RPG. And I'm okay with having that as an enemy. Having it as something you're communicating with, okay, fine, that can be an interesting twist sometimes. But having this turn into like the entire forced like main quest all of a sudden, it just really came out of nowhere, and it did not work for me at all. And there's some other elements that I wasn't too keen on as well. But it's a bummer, because honestly, I was just prepared to unleash praise upon this product, because I think it is so well constructed from a purely organizational standpoint that I was absolutely prepared to fall head over heels for it. And really I was for probably the first 30 or 40 pages of this, what amounts to be almost a 90-page book that I believe was kickstarted earlier this year. Very, very impressive, except I just don't think it quite sticks the landing, and the final, the final two chapters or parts in this case, which are the big dungeon crawls, the storyline with those doesn't quite work for me. But we can go over this adventure, because that's what this review is going to do. So it's designed for level 1, and we'll get players technically to level 5, I believe, at the end, which makes it a little bit bigger than Lost Mine of Phandelver. But unlike Lost Mine of Phandelver, this one is completely linear. So it's not a case of like, here's your hub town, and then here's some quests you can go out and do. This is a case of, we've got an opening quest for you. You're supposed to do this one first. After you do that, we're going to give you the next quest, which is the big quest hook, and then that's going to progress along a certain series of events, which that's okay if that's the way you want to design an adventure, but just note that I think that's a big reason why people appreciate Phandelver, and what a lot of more interesting adventures can provide is at least to give the illusion of player choice. So maybe they can choose to do this quest before this one, or, hopefully making some choices along the way. Whereas this one, it is pretty linear, but I will say that also makes it easy to run. And I think in the context of the story, it's perfectly fine, because you start out on basically a main quest that just has multiple steps to it. You do end up kind of leveling up rather quickly in this one, which as somebody who maybe I'm probably the opposite. I probably spend too much time in tier 1, but that's because tier 1 is kind of that special level of D&D where you can get away with a lot of stuff and make the players actually feel vulnerable in a very dangerous world. So I'm always leery about so many adventures. They tend to really fast track players along these low levels, and I'm always like, it's okay, like let's spend a little bit longer here, especially if I want to interject this into my, my own, if I were running a Ghost of Saltmarsh campaign or some coastal thing. I don't necessarily want to be said like, okay, and after this dungeon, they're immediately going to level up again. Like, well, probably not in my case. This is the region, which unfortunately the actual map isn't on. The town map isn't on this. The Griffoncrag's map, but Gullport represents a major location where Part 1 actually completely covers, which I like that. Instead of having like an appendix at the end that covers, okay, here's the important town they're going to be starting at, it's just basically that's the first chapter is like, here is the starting town. It's very salt marshy. It's a coastal town that pretty much relies on fish. Everybody eats fish. It's got just a really fun mix of NPCs. There's an old lady dock worker who's very surly, who's a secret wereshark. The priest is a Sahuagin, which is very interesting and basically evil and kind of rules a lot of things through fear. You'd think that would play into the main story a lot more and be more interesting, but it's unfortunately really not. It's just kind of a little side note. There's a rivalry between the tavern owner and the inn person, the innkeeper. The guy who runs the fish marketplace is kind of a corrupt, like kind of mafia boss type thing. Just a lot of fun, little NPC notes here and there, which I'm actually going to skip to the appendix at the end because it has some really incredible original character art we can see. Actually, I think it's in chapter 3 also. Absolutely incredible commissioned character art for all of these characters, and this appendix includes really helpful role-playing notes. It's got these aren't huge backstories. So many adventures I review, they have, their villains and their big important characters just have paragraphs and paragraphs of just information it can be interesting, but it's usually not needed. You can tell like the designer just wanted to write and wanted to write this big long narrative about their person, and then none of that really plays in context of the adventure. Pretty sure this is Justice Armand, by the way. It literally looks like it. Was this originally commissioned from some of your backers or designers maybe? So I in other words, I appreciate when we get just what we need. Like, succinctness is so important when it comes to design, and I really think this adventure nailed that very well in terms of giving me just the information I need. I don't need an NPC's entire life story, in other words. Just give me their motivations, give me stuff that would make them memorable, whether it's a physical quirk or an emotional quirk or whatever else, maybe some important, thing in their past that's like a one-sentence thing that makes it important to run. This does an absolutely great job of that, and it's such a character-focused first chapter, and then again in the chapter where we leave to go on the ship and we have the 3 characters are excellent. Like, I love that. Having it be all character based is exactly what I want in an adventure. So huge thumbs up to what chapter 1 provides, which is the opening mission, which I was hoping would kind of roll into the main quest somewhat, but it ends up just being its own thing as an investigation over a bunch of sick dock workers who have gotten sick from handling fish. And obviously it's a big deal because fish is like the whole economy of this town, so you end up tracking it down. It's 4 frog folk that end up being behind everything, and there's a little bit of investigation where you think it's one person, and it turns out it's just these frog people, and they're just apropos of nothing. Like, there's no big conspiracy. It does mention there's a little sidebar where it's like, well, who hired them? Well, DM, you can make up whatever other stories you want. Well, okay, that's fine, but you could also just make it more interesting in the context of the story, too, instead of it being, one-off thing. I was really picturing, like, okay, maybe there's a frog tribe somewhere we're going to meet that's going to have all this come into play, but no, that's not the case. Chapter 3 is, okay, here's the one I should have skipped to, the big, look at this awesome character art, it's so good. And this is an entire role-playing scene where the town, so the adventurers had just helped solve this investigation, and they're invited to basically this town meeting where a ship has recently sunk or gone down in the Griffoncrag Pass, which is a big deal because that's, a big part of their economy, as ships coming and going. And the NPCs here are meeting in this town to discuss whether they should help or not. And it doesn't really matter how the meeting goes, because no matter what happens, this cheerful poppin' brizzy bitch, I knew I was going to make that. I told myself, I had said this name like 3 times in a row. Like, I'm not going to screw this up. Brizzy Britches. Which is a amazing halfling name, by the way. Is basically pulls the character aside and says, look, I've got a friend who's got a friend with the captain of the ship, and she's a captain, and she's, we can go behind the town's back, and without their blessing, whatever, if you all just want to go investigate it and be heroes, you can go do that. So it's a weird case of like, it's a fun meeting, but it doesn't really end up mattering too much in terms of, it's not like they can pull people to their side or anything in that nature. In part 4, we get on the ship, and again, I was still on board this adventure because we get these. This really looks like old school, like 90s Sierra character art, which just warms my heart to no end. These really awesome ship crew aboard the Broken Dagger. There's a combat encounter with some anglerfish, which is a cool original creature, I think, that's included as a stat block here that attacks everybody. By the way, we do get maps for any of these major combat sequences, and including full dungeon maps. They are detailed, they are not colored. So it does almost everything I want from a battle map, minus the color, which is a bummer. It's to where the map art is so good that I'm not going to include it as a con, but neither am I going to put it as a pro. So I'm just kind of just leaving the maps off of it. But do note that we do get maps, they just don't have any color, which is a bummer. Just one more piece. I like that common encounter. I love the crew. I like that it's, a storm. We pull up to the lighthouse. There's griffins attacking the lighthouse. The dude in the lighthouse can kind of move the light around to manipulate the griffins. Turns out his parents had been killed by these griffins because they were displaced by the manticore. So it's a nice little rolling up of, the player slowly realizing what's going on. You can put 2 and 2 together and think, okay, these griffins were just scared out of the crag. Like, what could possibly scare these griffins out? And I like that the BBEG is not some kind of evil cult or monstrous demon or something. It's just a monster that, just a classic, like a monster got into this area that normally doesn't have this powerful monster in it and has displaced the local fauna, basically. And, that's why all the griffins are suddenly attacking this lighthouse, because they've been displaced out of their area, and it turns out why all this spider problem is happening. So all of this I'm totally on board for. There's a nice, the players have made level 2 by now, and they defeat these griffins. They have a nice long rest. They get to talk to that halfling and look through the spyglass and kind of investigate a little bit of the area they need to go to. All of that works well. We're level 3. We're going to the crash ship, which is a Scarlet Cavalier. Totally on board with everything so far. We make it to the beach. We do some investigation. And now is when the adventure starts to lose me, because up until now I was completely 100% on board and I loved this adventure. We're on page 42, by the way. There's 2 things that really lose me in this adventure. And I will say that I was kind of picturing, okay, obviously the ship is going to play into the adventure. The rescue is going to play in, we're going to have to rescue these people. Maybe there's going to be like an underwater ship dungeon or something, or maybe there'll be some undead involved. Like, what's going on? What ends up happening is you find the 2 survivors, which of course one of them is the captain, which seems kind of weird. It feels like the captain should always be the one to go down with the ship, but okay, fine. We can have a nice reunion between your 2 captains. And then one other just random red shirt. They've escaped into this cave, but before you even make it in there, you're on the beach, and then the 2 things basically happen. One of them is these spiders, which are called wasp spiders, come down, and they can be a combat encounter, but they're also like semi-sentient, and they can communicate. By the way, images of spiders, for those of you that don't like it, there's a lot of spiders in this adventure, which you wouldn't fucking know that from the cover, but a lot of spider shit here. And I'm not a huge fan of spiders. They can communicate with you emotionally, which there was another. I feel like there's a couple. The fairy dragon, that was one. I've used that kind of creature before. The fairy dragon in To Annihilation is one that I use that can communicate via like emotions. And that's the case here, which can be interesting if it's like one. I feel like it's interesting if it's like one creature that can do it, a unique creature, not some bizarre like spider thing that can do it. So the players can kind of communicate with this thing, and maybe they can kind of learn what's going on, which is essentially a complicated way of conveying to the party that this manticore came in and has been just wrecking shit left and right, and one of her young got killed. She blames the spiders, and then she got some of the spiders on her side, so there's this like civil war between the spider. Like all of this, I was like, well, what is going on? Like, this is not at all what I thought this adventure was going, which I guess that can be a plus in one way, because it's not like it's using goblins or something that are just talking to the players. Spiders is pretty bizarre, but to me, it just didn't really work. And the other thing that doesn't work is the Manticore herself, which her name is Nalitia, is portrayed as just awful. Like, she is just a sadistic, cruel monster. And I get that Manticores are they are intelligent, although they have like a 7, so they're, you know, not super tactically intelligent or anything. And they are evil. Like, I believe their stat block says they're lawful evil. So they're not just like raving beasts or anything, and they're not also going to be out of the goodness of their heart. But I thought it was really interesting that she specifically has younglings, or whatever she fucking calls her young manticores. And it really takes away the interesting moral quandary of having a monster with young. Because I think that's always a really interesting thing to throw at the parties. As somebody who just recently ran through that in our adventures with Rime of the Frost Maiden, slight spoilers for that, or one part of the mountain climb part of that adventure is the party can come across a Yeti with a child. And the Yeti is, you know, can be hostile, or the party could try to back away from it. And I thought that was a really interesting thing to throw at the party, and it was really interesting the way my party dealt with that situation, which was they didn't want to fight that encounter. And I think by having this Manticore be so over the top, comically, like, just remind me of like Ramsay Bolton from Game of Thrones, just like, you know, a cruel smile on her face and just mocking the players and just being a complete dick. It really takes that factor out of it. You know, if it was more of a, you know, she was doing this as a means of survival, and I thought it'd be a cool hook to make it like she was vengeful because like one of her young, she had moved in here, or maybe she was displaced here, she had to flee some area, which I think that was the case, like a storm brought her here with her young, and one of her young was killed, and so she's doing this for revenge and trying to keep the other ones alive. Like, that is 100%, if I was running this adventure, I would completely rewrite how she's portrayed here and make it more of a complex character, which I think that's more interesting. And I always think it's more interesting when you have a monster who doesn't act like how you would think a monster would. And instead, not only does the monster act like a monster, it acts like an over-the-top, comically, almost to the point where you can't take it, I think you're not supposed to take it seriously, monster. It's just, I don't know, it's a weird tone to me. It just did not work. And it's a shame that both those things happen right here, right now, and just immediately my interest level just plummeted for this adventure, which is a bummer because now we're getting into the dungeon crawl, which I like the dungeon crawl. The other weird thing is a Manticore is a CR3, you know, usually not a boss. The one here is a CR4. It's been upscaled slightly, and I looked at the stat block and compared them, and it's just very much slight, like literally more hit points, more armor class, more to hit. Like, all the numbers are basically like +1 or +2. The big difference is she has legendary resistance, which I do like. Give your bosses legendary resistance. If you don't want them to get, you know, locked down by hypnotic pattern or something, do that. We're level 3 when this Manticore first appears, and it's supposed to be this terrifying thing where all the players are supposed to flee into the cave where the 2 other survivors from the ship are, and then they are forced to make their way through this whole cave complex. I can't imagine a level 3 party wouldn't just try to fight this Manticore. Like, I don't know how, like, I guess if your players don't have any metagame knowledge or anything, like, Manticores, yeah, they're strong, but, like, this is level 3, and keep in mind, the level 3 party got to fully rest after the Griffin encounter and after the Anglerfish encounter. They're basically a fully rested level 3 party. Like, they can kick that Manticore's ass. I'm sorry, but I don't know, level 4, like, CR4 or not. I think you need to make sure it was, like, flying in the air at the time, or, like, up high, because it's supposed to, like, come down on a cliff and kill one of the spider on the beach. I would make it out of range. If it stays at range the whole time and flings its tail spikes, that definitely makes it a pain in the ass. But otherwise, I don't know. It's supposed to strike fear in the hearts of these level 3 players. I'm like, I don't know, man. At level 3, the player's starting to throw their swagger around. They make it to level 4, and then they go into this pretty big dungeon crawl, which I like the design of it. It's kind of a multi-tiered cave system, which I appreciate. Kind of hard to tell on this map, but there's, you know, caves that go underneath, caves that go above, and it's basically a big spider layer. There's some crabs in a kind of underground river that are eating some of the spiders. But there is a bizarre point where you literally come across like 2 different spider clans fighting each other, and they've all got their telepathic emotional thing going on. I just couldn't wrap my head around the spider thing. It's like we already had the big monster of the Manticore, and of course there's a spider queen here. There's always a spider queen. Maybe I think, you know, I'm glad we didn't use kobolds and goblins. I'm glad about that. But if you're gonna use, like, the next most frequent monster to use is a fucking spider, and we went hard on the spiders, and I wasn't a big fan of that. You know, you can talk with the queen. You're supposed to talk with the queen. You can fight her. it's a bit of an alien situation where she's got eggs everywhere, and of course if you jack with them she will absolutely fight you, but otherwise she'll just basically, you know, tell the players like, hey, the manticore came in, convinced some of my spiders to turn against me, and now she's got some of them on the manticore side. Can you please go kill that manticore for me? And the players would probably already be on board with killing the manticore because they've already rescued their people, who I think just stay behind in the cave while they go through this cave complex. So I like the layout of the dungeon and everything. I just could not. I would use this as just a generic spider fight. Like there's just you get stuck in this cave. Maybe the manticore maybe causes a, I don't know, explosion or something to come, or maybe she's got some kind of other interesting minions to use. Maybe there's water creatures. Maybe the frog folk. Hey, the frog folk from the first chapter, they're taking advantage of this manticore displacing the area, and maybe they're starting to work with her or worship it as a god or something. And they hem the players into this area, and now the players have to work through. And of course, there's spiders in the caves that are dangerous and stuff. That would have been fine. I couldn't wrap my head around the spiders being these like emotionally telepathic creatures having their own issues. The final area is a boss arena, which very much reminded me of like a Monster Hunter situation, where as soon as you enter this clifftop zone, the manticore becomes aware of the party, and you're supposed to actually roll initiative even as soon as the players enter this zone, and it becomes just a constant warfare battle. And they could even make their way back to the nest, or the manticore could call her kids, I guess, to come help her. She only has one of the spider minions on her side, by the way, which again, I just can't. The player's level 4 now. Like, they can take a manticore. Come on, even a manticore legendary resistance. She doesn't have layer action, doesn't have, and it's just slightly upscaled. I don't think she has any special magic items or anything. I would give her a lot more minions and make this a much more compelling fight. I like the idea behind it. Basically, just turn it into a boss arena, and there's just no chance for any kind of diplomacy or checks or anything, because she's just such a asshole that by the time you make it up here, you absolutely want to kill her and I guess slaughter the kids. I know it doesn't really mention about that. It kind of steers away from like, she's got some offspring and they're just evil because manticores are evil. I maybe the thing I would have liked to seen is like, are manticores evil? Like, play with that a little bit more and maybe make it more of a gray area. And I think it would have been more interesting had it be like she's doing this out of necessity or out of survival for her kids, for example. And she's not overly cruel, and then, maybe use some of the other kind of creatures, not goblins or kobolds, and maybe not spiders, but there was a lot of stuff I really liked about this, but a lot of the stuff at the end for these last two sections just kind of dropped it for me to where it was in the running for like, oh, this is one of my favorite adventures I've read all year, to like, okay, it's still a good adventure, but not one that I particularly enjoy, at least in the latter half. We do get a little bit of an epilogue here where it kind of just gives hints about things that I would have liked to really see, which are expanding on some of the more interesting characters from the town, which is like the were-shark old lady dock worker, like loses a hand to a giant crocodile. That's pretty interesting. One of the priestesses is actually a sea hag. Like, that's pretty interesting. It does a lot of cool stuff with that, but it's more like, hey, here's just some kind of interesting adventure hooks I put in there for the DM, which is fine. I don't necessarily expect to make full adventures out of all of those, but it would have been nice to have something other than this just kind of linear main quest that keeps going. And I think it's time to go over my pros and cons for Rescue at Griffoncrag Pass. Pro: a simple but effective plot that is well organized and easy to run. Yes, it's very linear, but I don't necessarily mind the linearity, and I think it lends itself to making it very easy and intuitive to actually run from a DM standpoint of view. There's not a lot of difficult things to keep track of or plot points or anything. It's just going from one step to the next, and I think all the steps are generally pretty fun and engaging until you get to the final two dungeons, and I've talked about those. Pro: immersive art design and fantastic original character art for major NPCs. Oh my goodness, this product is just absolutely gorgeous from a purely reading standpoint. Like this, like I said, it's a gold standard for how to organize an adventure with all these gorgeous full page art, all that great original character art, and the way it's organized with each of these individual parts has an overview which talks about, hey, what elements of this adventure, is this a role-playing section, is this a dungeon crawling section, what happens from beginning to end, and at the end it says, okay, now it's the time to level up your characters. I really don't have to hunt for anything, which for any adventure that's over, 30 or 40 pages should absolutely be the way adventures are designed and organized. So huge thumbs up for that. Pro, role-playing references for over a dozen NPCs. That's that appendix I showed at the end, which includes those flaws, bonds, traits, all that which again, not too much information, just enough information. And then we also get all the stat blocks for all the new monsters and things at the end. And pro, it's a low-level adventure that doesn't resort to goblins or kobolds. So I did give a pro that we didn't just use the same, and same could be said of bandits and cultists, really. Like, it doesn't use the usual shit we always see for low-level adventures. It uses some stuff completely differently, and a lot of that is because of the coastal town theme. So we get to use more of those kinds of creatures, which is cool until we get to the spider thing. And those are part of my cons, which I did include 2 cons here, which I divided up my 2 main thoughts into 2 different points. One of them is the emotionally telepathic spider civil war is a bizarre plot point that dominates the latter half of the adventure. That story just did not work for me. I didn't like the idea of this whole spider clan and how it pertains to the main quest. I just feel like it takes away from the entire rescue before. Like, we just forgot about the people we just saved. Instead, now we're worried about these spiders. Maybe it's just hard for me to empathize with a spider. I don't know, but it didn't work for me. And the other thing that didn't work for me is the BBEG's personality. The Manticore's personality, Nalicia, is just portrayed as a comically sadistic villain, which is not at all how I'd like to see it done. Instead, I thought she would be a more interesting, complex character, given the fact that she is a monster in a different place, and she's got these young kids that she's actually raising and trying to keep alive, and one of them gets killed, so that can motivate her to be more aggressive. I thought that was a really missed opportunity to make that a more morally complex for the monster, and also for the player characters when they have to thus deal with her. Final verdict, Rescue at Griffoncrag Pass doesn't quite stick the landing after its excellent first half, but it's a worthy low-level adventure elevated by beautiful artwork and intuitive design. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. You can support my work at patreon.com/RogueWatson. Shouts to Platinum patrons Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Wizard Princess, Christopher, Thomas, Captain Mike, Adam, Aiden, Stan, Nathan, Alex, Chad, Alexander, and Dan. And gold patrons RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Dead Lizard, Lion, Sam, Ross, Lumpy Spuds, Jerome, Scalenia, Nick, Farty McButterpants, Blood Angel, Veronis, Baboon, Nathan, and Fast Like a Tortoise. Thank you all very much for your support.